There's a pattern in sold data that almost no one talks about, and it explains why some neighborhoods appreciated smoothly over the last 6 years, why others spiked and others stalled, and why few stayed surprisingly affordable even while everything around them changed. Most people never see this pattern because they are focused on headlines, prices, or timing. Today, I'm going to walk you through what actually happened using real, actual sold data from 2019 until now. But please, stay with me till the end because once you see this pattern, you can spot it in any neighborhood before you buy. I'm Cameron Brio and I'm a realtor here in Greater Moncton. If you are thinking about buying or selling in New Brunswick, and you want to understand the actual data behind your decision, this video is for you. I sourced every residential sale in Greater Moncton from 2019 through to the end of 2025 from the exported CREA data. Not asking prices, not what people hope to get, what actually closed and sold. We're talking about multiple market cycles packed into 6 years. 2019 we'll call the pre-pandemic baseline. 2020 to 2021 we'll call the surge that everyone remembers. And 2022 to 2023, that's the slowdown that everybody seemed to be worried about. And 24 to 25, we'll call that selective recovery. Most people focus on whether prices went up or down, but when you look at the full picture, sales volume, day on market, price movement, and neighborhood participation, you see something that is more interesting. The market didn't just move, it sorted, and that sorting reveals which neighborhoods were built to handle this change and which ones truly got tested. Let's start with activity because this is where most people misread what actually happened. In 2021, Moncton North saw about 597 sales. That was peak frenzy. By 2023, that dropped to 413. Now, if you only read the headlines, that sounds like a collapse. What I found interesting, in 2019, before anyone was talking about a housing boom, Moncton North actually did 532 sales. And in 2025, 446 sales. Would you say that this is a market that broke? My opinion is that this market simply normalized. The same pattern shows up in Moncton East and Riverview West. Big surge, pullback, then steady participation again. What that tells us is this: durable neighborhoods don't need perfect conditions to stay active. They just need reasons people keep choosing them. And when we look at which neighborhoods kept transacting, even during the slow years, we start to see the winners emerge. All right, let's talk about what everybody actually cares about. Price, median price to be exact. From 2019 to 2025, median prices across Greater Moncton rose between 45 and 30% depending on where you bought. Let me go over the range. Riverview West in 2019, the median price was $152,000. In 2025, that median was $349,000. That's about 130% appreciation in 6 years. Moncton North, 2019, the median price was sitting around $192,000. In 2025, we're looking at about $415,000, roughly 116% increase. In Moncton 2019, we saw a median price of $165,000, and in 2025, we're sitting at about $366,000. That is 122%, people. Here's what I found interesting. Even during 2023, perhaps the slowest year of sales, median prices barely pulled back. In some districts, they actually held completely flat. And in others, they dipped about 3 to 5%, and they seem to recover by 2024. This is really important to understand. The market didn't just correct in a way that people expected, or what we saw nationally. It didn't crash. It didn't punish people who bought in 2021. Now, don't get me wrong, I have heard stories about people who purchased in 2021 who might have overpaid or skipped on some of the conditions. On the flip side, people might have purchased with short-term thinking during this time. So what the market did was slow down participation and give buyers a bit of time to think. That's a very different story than what most people assumed was happening. I know that water cooler conversations and national headlines impacted this reality. Okay, so when I mention an area like Moncton North, our real estate board actually calls that a district, and it actually relates to the postal code range. And of course, Moncton North can be subdivided into many sub-districts that include districts like Kingswood, So while prices are generally trending upward, there could be sub-districts that might not have followed the same trend, but the median looks after the whole district. All right, please keep in mind that market pricing is determined by what a buyer is willing to pay, and it is normally based on recent sold data of a comparable property in that area, including things but not limited to age, condition, upgrades. They're all part of that equation. There is a lot to unpack with this pricing, and I will have a full video detailing how we arrive at price. So if prices didn't correct, where buyers actually get leverage? Days on market. In 2021, homes in West Riverview were averaging under 30 days on market. They saw multiple offers and bidding wars, the whole thing. By 2025, that same area is sitting at low to mid 40 days on market. That extra 2 weeks, well, if you ask me, that's buyers having some time to think. So during that time, you'd do your inspection, you'd get your financing together, and you would compare your options and potentially have time to negotiate. And time to negotiate terms that actually matter to you, not just the price. And so to me, days on market isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just a signal for how much breathing room buyers could potentially have. And in 2025, in most of Greater Moncton, buyers had more of it than they did in the last 4 years. Which brings us to the framework I use to evaluate any neighborhood. Because appreciation is only part of the equation, the examples will relate to Greater Moncton, but this framework can apply to most markets in North America. Here's how I think about long-term neighborhood strength. I call it the durability filter, and it's built on 5 things. Number 1 is consistent participation. Does this area transact even when the market is boring? If a neighborhood only moves during hype cycles, to me, that's a flag. The best areas see steady sales across multiple years, even in slow ones. Moncton North and Moncton East both pass this test. Riverview West, it does too. Number 2 is sales activity. And sales activity is how many people are actually buying and selling. So more transaction equals more price discovery equals less guessing when it is your turn to sell. Low transaction areas can appreciate, but they're harder to exit if the timing doesn't line up. Number 3 is the days on market trends. Is the area giving buyers time to think or forcing them to rush? In 2025, areas with 40 to 50 days on market are healthier than you'd actually think. It means that the market is functioning, it's not frozen, it's not frenzied. And number 5, day one sanity. If I bought here today and nothing exciting happened for 3 years, would I still be okay? And to me, this might be the most important one. You have to think about real estate on a longer time horizon than just 1 year. If your entire plan depends on appreciation, rates dropping, or the market coming back, that's speculation. That's not strategy. When you run a neighborhood through this filter, you might start to see why some areas appreciated by 130% and others stayed a little bit more flat. And while others appreciated but got stuck when conditions changed. This might make more sense in just a minute. Here's the good stuff. All right, now that you understand the framework, let's apply it to 5 neighborhoods that tell the most interesting stories from 2019 to 2025. Down in the comments, let me know what neighborhood you think will be on the top. You can go down. Okay, I am not ranking these by best or worst because the right neighborhood actually depends on your priorities. But I am going to show you what the data actually reveals about durability, sales activity, and long-term performance. Let's start with the one that surprised even me. Drumroll please. Riverview West. We'll call it the quiet champion. Riverview West is the appreciation leader, and it's not even close. Here are the numbers. 2019 median price is $152,000, and 2025, we get all the way up to $349,000. Our total depreciation is 129.6%, with an annual average growth of 15.3%. That means that if you bought a median-priced home in 2019 in West Riverview, it more than doubled in value in 6 years. But here's what makes the story different from a speculative bubble. This area didn't just appreciate, it transacted. 2019, we saw 163 sales. 2021, we saw 186 sales. That was modest growth, not frenzy. In 2023, we saw 135 sales, pulled back slightly. And in 2025, we saw 143 sales. recovered quickly. Even during the slowest year, this neighborhood moved 135 homes. That's sales activity. That's depth. That is not a few lucky sales. It's sustained demand. Also note that this area did see lots of new construction supply over this time frame. When we look at days on market, in 2021, we are under 30 days. This is competitive, but it's not considered insane. In 2025, we were around 40-ish days. That was healthy, and people were taking their time. This is really important. The market slowed just enough to give buyers breathing room, but not so much that sellers panicked or that inventory piled up. So why Riverview West? Well, it checks every box in the durability filter. Family infrastructure, excellent schools, parks, recreation facilities. Coming soon, maybe 2027, 2028. The proximity to downtown Moncton, it's about 10 minutes. There's relatively easy access to get to the highway, and the housing stock. Most homes are turnkey. They're well maintained, they're easy to finance, there's no sketchy flips, there's no extreme fixer-uppers for the most part. There's demographic stability, seems to be young families, dual income households, professionals who seem to stay about 5 to 10 years. Looking at replaceability, if someone's looking at a $350,000 home year, they understand it instantly. No explaining required. This is what durable demand looks like. It doesn't need hype, it doesn't need perfect rates, it just needs reasons for people to keep choosing it. And West Riverview has those in abundance. Now, does that mean that everybody should buy here? No, because appreciation isn't the only thing that matters. Let me show you why. Next on the list is Moncton North, which we'll call the forgiving workhorse. If Riverview West is the appreciation champion, Moncton North is the forgiving champion. And I know a lot of people will have this at the top of their list. So let's look at the numbers. In 2019, the median price was sitting around $192,000. In 2025, they were sitting around $415,000, giving a total appreciation of 116.1%. The annual average growth is about 13.5%. Still massive growth, but here's what really matters, is the sales activity. This is the deepest, most active neighborhood in Greater Moncton. In 2019, we saw 532 sales. In 2021, we saw 597 sales. And consider this is what everybody calls the peak of the market, looking at real estate in Canada. Now through to 2023, we saw 413 sales, which was a bit of a pullback. In 2025, we went up to 446 sales. Even during the worst slowdown, this area moved over 400 homes. That's more than most neighborhoods do in their best year. You know what that means? If you buy a house here, and life changes, like you get a job transfer or your family grows, whatever, you're not stuck. There's always a buyer pool. There's always price discovery. That's forgiveness. So we look at days on market. 2021, we saw average days on market of 28 days. 2025, 42 days. Again, the market didn't freeze. It just gave buyers time to think. And that's because there's so much transaction volume that the extra days don't really seem to hurt sellers. It's just a healthier rhythm. So going over some of the neighborhood highlights, the neighborhood does have a mix of older homes with newer homes. There are even some commercial areas that make it easy to get groceries or see a doctor. Moncton North is diverse. You've got established homes from the 80s and 90s, newer subdivisions like in the Mapleton area, and walkable pockets to the middle school or grade schools. And like I said, shopping. There are a range of price points. Right now, we're sitting somewhere around $300,000 to $500K plus. This diversity in home types creates resilience. You are not dependent on buyer type. Families, first-timers, move-up buyers, they all participate here. A trade-off? You won't get Riverview West appreciation rate, but you get something better. Optionality. If you need to sell in 2 years instead of 10, you might not be praying for the perfect buyer. You're listing into an active, functioning market. And that leads us to the third neighborhood where appreciation and stability come together almost perfectly. Moncton East, and it's what I'm going to call the Goldilocks neighborhood. Not too hot, not too cold, just right for long-term holders. Looking at the numbers, 2019, we saw a median price of $165,000 all the way up to $366,000 in 2025. That is about 121% of appreciation with an annual growth of 14.2%. So you're getting Riverview West level appreciation with Moncton North level sales activity. So jumping into sales activity, in 2019, we saw 235 sales. In 2025, we saw 284 sales. Certainly not as deep as Moncton North, but still very strong. Nearly 300 transactions in 2025 means this area didn't go dormant, it stayed functional. And when we look at the days on market, In 2021, we saw 32 days on market, and 2025, 45 days on market. That is a healthy pace, not panic, not stagnation. So why might this neighborhood work? It's got a mix of residential streets with schools, even some retail stores. Moncton East certainly benefits from three things. Affordability, there are some pockets that are less expensive than Riverview, but they offer similar quality of life and access to things like schools. It's also close to Champlain Place without being on the main drag. This is the neighborhood for people who want appreciation, but also want to sleep well at night, meaning they probably are thinking longer term than most in homeownership. You're not chasing the highest return. You're building equity in a place that's proven it can handle multiple market cycles without breaking. The profile of the neighborhood, there are quite a few first-time buyers that succeed in this area. There are young families. There are people who are trading up from either renting or smaller homes, and even people who are priced out of other neighborhoods close by. Now, the next two neighborhoods tell a little bit of a different story. Not worse, just different, and understanding the difference is critical. The next area is Dieppe Central to be exact. Now, this area is a little bit bigger than the other ones that we've looked at, and it's pretty all-encompassing of quite a few different home types at a lower price range. There are some sub-districts within the immediate area that are not included here. So we're going to dive into Central. Looking at the median price in 2019, it was approximately $210,000. In 2025, we saw $385,000. Total appreciation was 83.3% with an average annual growth of 10.6%. Still strong growth, but noticeably more moderate than the first three. And that's not a bug, it's a feature. For sales activity, we saw 288 sales in 2019. In 2021, we saw 340. Jumping over to 2023, we saw 232, and in 2025, we saw 251 sales. It's consistent, not explosive, not volatile, just steady participation. And days on market, we've remained relatively flat. 35 days in 2021 and 48 days in 2025. To me, this is slightly longer than the core Moncton neighborhoods, but still well within a healthy range. Some of the draws in this community, it's bilingual, there's modern infrastructure, the parks here are amazing. Also, Dieppe is the French language hub of Greater Moncton, and that can create some specific buyers that want to be in specific neighborhoods. To me, this community does not depend on frenzy to function. It has a clear identity, a loyal buyer base, and infrastructure that supports long-term living. We didn't see the wild swings here, but in certain pockets and certain home types, we saw returns that were similar to the ones of those of semi-detached in Moncton North. And honestly, for a lot of buyers, especially those with young families or fixed budgets, this is exactly the right neighborhood for you. Okay, so the last area that a lot of people are watching, but maybe for the wrong reasons, it's Shediac and the districts that encompass the Shediac-area being Capellet, Shediac Bridge, and all the surrounding districts. They all appreciate it strongly, but it requires a different mindset to buy here. Looking at the sales data, the median price in 2019 was $145,000, and in 2025, it was $315,000, showing a total appreciation during that time of 117.2%, a growth rate of 13.8%. On paper, that looks fantastic. And for some buyers, it absolutely is. But here's the full picture told by sales activity. In 2019, we saw 98 sales. In 2021, we saw 121 sales, declining to 78 sales through into 2023. And in 2025, we're showing 89 sales. This is a smaller market with less sales activity, which means fewer data points, which means less price discovery. So looking at the days on market, in 2021, we were sitting at 38 days, and 2025, we were sitting at 58 days. This is noticeably longer than Moncton, and that's not necessarily bad. It just means that buyers here are taking more time and sellers need more patience. So if you're looking to buy here or be here in the Shediac-area, you probably like the ocean and the beach. And yes, I realize it's seasonal to use the beach, but if you want proximity to the water, a quiet, more rural lifestyle, maybe some seasonal tour infrastructure like restaurants or fish and chip shacks, or a home that feels like vacation, this area certainly delivers. But you need to go in clear-eyed. The trade-off here is resale timing. If you need to sell quickly, you will be waiting longer for the right buyer. There is seasonal variability, and market activity tends to peak in the spring and summer, and yes, it does slow in the winter. You'll also want to consider commute if you work in around Moncton. You're probably adding about 30 minutes each way every day. This certainly isn't a knock on Shediac, it's just clarity if you are not super familiar with this area. If you're buying for lifestyle and plan to hold for long term, this area has proven it can appreciate. But if you need flexibility or to sell quickly, you're trading that for lifestyle. And really, it all depends on what you want. So there it is, 5 neighborhoods/areas that tell 5 different stories. West Riverview, appreciation leader. Moncton North, volume king. Moncton East, balance bet. Steady performer. Shediac, the patience play. None of them are perfect. All of them have trade-offs, and that's the whole point of this framework. It's about finding the right one for where you are in life and what you're trying to build. Let me leave you with one last thought before we wrap up. Some neighborhoods grow fast, others forgive mistakes. The best long-term decision usually balances both. Real estate is a long game. Most regret does not come from missing the perfect time to buy. It comes from buying something fragile, something that only works if conditions stay perfect. The neighborhoods that won from 2019 to 2025 weren't the ones that moved the fastest. They were the ones that stayed functional across multiple cycles. If there's one thing that I hope you take away from this, it's appreciation. It's not random, and it isn't magic. It follows patterns of human behavior. The neighborhoods that grew steadily were guessing. Buyers kept choosing them, even when the market slowed. Once you understand this pattern, you stop trying to predict the market and you start making calmer decisions. That's how you buy something that still makes sense. Not just today, but 10 years from now. And if you want help applying this to your own search, that's the conversation I am always happy to have. If you click the first link down in the description, you can book a strategy call with me and we can discuss your situation. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.